Welcome to tonight's Public Safety Committee. Tonight is Tuesday, December 1st, and counselors present tonight on the Public Safety Committee are Councilor Boschman, Councilor Walsh, Councilor Kuchar, and Councilor Van Hazinga. Also joining us is Sergeant Boudreau from the Fitchburg Police Department, and Tom Strowski from the Community Development, and I believe Mark Babadero from the Building Department. So welcome, everyone. Our first agenda is petition 08820, Sergeant Daniel Boudreau, Councilor Amy Green, and Councilor Bernie Schultz to amend Chapter 169 of the City Code by adding no parking on Ella Street, north side 350 feet from South Street to Burnap Street, and south side starting 54 feet from South Street to Burnap Street. No parking Kingsbury Street east and west side from Ellis Street to Drury Lane. No parking Drury Lane north and south side entire street Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Leave current no parking at all time signs in place. So, Sergeant Boudreau, do you want to speak a little bit about how this petition came to be?
Yeah, we've been looking at that for probably a couple of years over there at the school, maybe even longer. But what was happening at drop-off time in the morning, and when people were picking their children up after school, instead of parking over in the parking lot, and they do have, the school worked with us last year, and they did make it so that you could fit all cars in the back parking lot. They put staff out there to line them up correctly. But what's happening is people just believe that if they park across the street and use the crosswalk on South Street, they can walk their children over quicker, or they don't have to wait in that line. Ironically, all the children go into the back parking lot now anyways, so it really takes them longer, but we can't get it in their head not to do it. And what's happening is they're just causing havoc over on these side streets. They're blocking people's driveways, they're doing U-turns. We've had complaints of them knocking people's barrels over, driving over their lawn. Mm-hmm. So we tried to do it with a little educational, and it just didn't seem to be working. So at the beginning of this year, we did some temporary signage over there. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see how it was going to work because of the COVID stopping school. So we didn't do much of a test over there, but we're speaking with the residents and what we've seen in the past. I think putting the permanent signs should take care of the problem over there. And it gives us an avenue. If we have to, we'll go and enforce. So that's kind of how we got to this point.
Okay, thank you. I have Paul Boschman to speak.
One quick question, and that's it. Why are we going 2 to 4 and not 2 to 3?
The timing, counselor, I think we just kind of did it around the time that they get out of school. We don't want to make it just for, too short of a time. So if you have people picking their kids up a little later, or maybe an after school function, we're still not going to have them parking over there.
All right, okay.
That was in conjunction with talking with the school also.
All right, I got no problem with it.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you. I just have a clarification question. It says, the last sentence says, no parking Drury Lane north and south side entire street, comma, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Do those times apply just to parking on Drury Lane, or all of the no parking?
That's for all of the no parking, counselor. Other than there are 2 small sections over there that are no parking at all times. We're going to leave those in place, and then the times would be added to the other areas.
Okay, I would just recommend maybe putting a period there instead of a comma after entire street, because it looks like it only applies to that one sentence.
Okay,
Maybe I'm wearing my professor hat, but it just.
No, I appreciate it. What will happen with this, if you do pass it from the council, the city gets this, and they clean up any deficiencies they see, and they usually contact me And they may change a little wording.
That would work for me. And that would take care of my question. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Counselor Walsh, do you want to make an amendment to reflect that, or do we want to wait until it comes back to us?
I'll leave that up to Sergeant Boudreau and the mechanism that they have in place. I have confidence in them that they'll be able to take care of that and make that clear. So I'm good with leaving it as is and just letting Sergeant Boudreau take care of that, you know, in their prescribed system that they already have.
Okay, Counselor Boishman?
One quick question. On Drury Lane, there's only 4 houses on Drury Lane, right?
I believe so, Counselor, yes.
So we're saying that if the people have company at their houses, that they won't be allowed to park on the street either?
During those times, there would be no parking. Just so you know, Counselor, I did have it in the packet, but I'm not sure if you all got those or, we sent out a letter and dropped them off to every household this would affect, to give us any feedback they had, and we received no negative feedback from anyone. We actually had one household that all no parking at all times. But we thought, you know, that would kind of what you're saying. If you had somebody come visit off hours, that wouldn't be fair to you. So that's why we put the times in there. But it technically would be during those times. There is no parking out there.
Oh, the only reason why I asked that, remember the council chair, Madam Chair, Pearl Street, we put no parking, then all of a sudden they had a party and they were parking all on the street right after that, after we passed no parking. And it was a graduation party, if I'm not mistaken. All right, that's all I asked. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the residents of Drury Lane would be looking forward to this actually making it into city code. So they've got some repercussion on taking back their property. So I'll be looking for, I guess I have a motion and second. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is passed. Thank you. Okay, next, petition 12820, Counselor Paul Boishman to petition that all applications for a dealer's license must be for 10 cars minimum. And I believe that we've got Mark Barbadero from the building department and perhaps Mary Jo Bohart also. Can both of you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I guess, Mr. Barbadero, we'll start with you and what you think about this petition as it stands in front of you.
Well, I certainly support the sentiment because I think the city has been suffering from very small lot car dealerships that tend to get overloaded and they tend to spill out into the streets, and they are a bit of a road hazard at times when they're getting loaded and unloaded from the street with tow trucks and such. And I don't have a good mechanism in zoning for dealing with pre-existing non-conforming small car dealerships that are already in existence, because if they're existing, they're allowed to maintain operation. So it would be nice to have another control that maybe you guys could exercise with your license.
Okay, thank you. Tom, do you have from community development, do you have any weigh-in on this, knowing that zoning changes are happening?
Yeah, I generally concur with Commissioner Barbadoro. We're certainly going to look at ways in which we can tweak our zoning to support exactly what Councilor Boishman's getting to. But there is that thorny issue of pre-existing non-conforming uses. So even if we change it today, any small used car lots already in existence will still be allowed to continue. So there should be an additional mechanism, I think, is what Commissioner Barbadoro is getting at. One thing I would say and would hope that we wouldn't prohibit. There are a number of, repair shops around town. Where I get my oil changed at Viola, for example, right across from City Hall. Occasionally there'll be a used car for sale that's accessory to the use, but it is not their primary use to be a used car facility. I think that's fairly common with repair shops. So I hope there would be allowances for those small businesses to conduct that as well without being a full-fledged used car operation. But I don't know if Mark has any thoughts there, but generally concur with his sentiment. And Councilman Brochman.
I just have one question about this, is that does the city or does public safety have any other control mechanism for degrees or levels of car dealerships? Like what if it's a full blown, that's all they want to do is just, they want a lot where all they do is just sell cars. And we're saying, okay, then, it's got to be set up for at least 10 cars to sell, 2 employees, and 2 people or 3 people visiting at the time. And then that's one type of license they apply for. And then another type of license would be, I want to fix a vehicle, but I want to fix the vehicles that I sell. So I'm thinking of like a Rick Roberti type of thing, where there's some mechanics and some selling of vehicles, or the one further up the street that does the same type of thing. They've got like a garage and a bay, but they also sell cars.
Right.
With moving forward with zoning, are we going to have a way to, I don't know, help with this? Or I'm just afraid that if we pass it as it is, then that's it. If you apply for a dealer's license, then that's all you're going to do is just be a car dealer. You're not going to be a repair shop. You're not going to be auto body. You're not going to be towing. You're just going to be an auto dealer.
And I'm going to defer to Mark on the bulk of this because again, I'm quite familiar as to how it operates within zoning, and we do have mechanisms to control and differentiate. We call it a primary versus an accessory use, and but again, if something had existed previous to any changes that would take place, they're already grandfathered in. So no matter what changes we make in the next round, it wouldn't apply to all the used car lots that are already in existence. And I'm not as well versed in the license process itself, so perhaps Mary Jo or Mark could chime in as to if we do have that differentiation in place. I believe we do.
Okay, and I'll leave this open for Mark or Mary Jo.
I'd like to speak, Chairman. That if a business was a new car dealership was moving into a site, we could send that business for a site plan review with the planning board, and they could lay out the parking spaces that would be appropriate. And then as part of that site plan decision, that would be how many vehicles they'd be allowed to have on the property. And then the dealer license could just coincide with that. But the grandfathered businesses, I don't have any good way to prevent overloading of cars with car repair shops and things like that. So and I see what Paul is intending to do here, which is basically try and put the kibosh on really small lots, which are undersized and incapable of being a car dealer. But I don't know how to get the flexibility that has been questioned here, which is how do you make sure that a repair shop can't also sell a vehicle or 2? And I don't know if you guys have an answer. I just don't have an answer.
The way I'm reading this isn't then they wouldn't be able to sell vehicles. Because this clearly says that all applications for a dealer's license must be for a minimum of 10 cars.
I wonder if perhaps it could be amended to get to some of the differentiation we're going towards. I think Councilor Ben has maybe some thoughts to that end. I don't know.
Yes, and I see that he is awaiting his turn. So Councilor Van Hazinga, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one thing that occurs to me is that even with the mechanics selling a couple cars here and there, we still want to make sure that they have adequate space on their lots to display those vehicles, because often we have a lot of car repair places that have cars stacked up in every little corner they can, and there's really not space. So I think that is, we don't want to prevent them from doing that, but we do want to make sure the site is adequate for this use, even if they want to sell a couple cars. And the other thought that comes to mind is that anything from stopping a business like Viola's from getting a license for 10 cars, even if they don't use 10 cars, they don't have 10 cars for sale. It seems like they would have, I don't want to put words in Mark's mouth, or anybody else who controls the permitting process, but it seems like they would have space to permit a license for 10 cars, and if they only use 2 or 3, that's fine. This is my.
Okay. And we have Mary Jo Bohart who would like to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody, and I know you all have seen it in the field occur, but my biggest concern would be future small parcels that are vacant and people wanting to do this on parcels that have never had this use. I respect whatever Mark Barbadoro and others feel we would do with the pre-existings, but we've all seen small lots filled with so many cars you couldn't even circulate on it. And I just feel there is some value into what Councillor Boschman has proposed. I respect that we don't want to step on the toes of, some of the businesses that do it correctly, or a repair shop that sells some every now and then. Maybe we can think through a way to accommodate those. But I think there is value in not having, I'll call it a freestanding, a primary use seller of cars where it's so small.
Okay, I guess my question would be, I guess maybe in the wording of this petition is that would we be able to accommodate anybody who wants to do business here in Fitchburg as a car dealer? That would be, is this their for a primary dealer's license or for a dealer's license as their primary business? I mean, as this reads right now, I'm thinking, okay, not for grandfathering, but for moving forward, are we only going to issue something called a dealer's license to a business that would only be able to have enough space for 10 cars to sell, plus whatever the zoning or planning board sets aside for the, like the site review? Are we shutting down the little micro businesses who want to, and we've all seen it. I mean, there's one on Water Street that's a perfect example, the much, much smaller one. But I don't know if everybody who's going to apply for a dealer's license is going to be able to afford to have that much space for 10 cars to sell at a minimum. Councilor Boschman?
The whole purpose of this petition that I put in for, I'm gonna go back to about 6 months ago. And let's go on the corner of Oak Hill Road and River Street. Now, I talked to the guy. I wasn't against the guy getting a permit. And I told Mark and I told Tom that I'm not out to stop people from making a living. If the guy wants to repair cars at the same time to sell cars, I have no problem with that. But I drive around like you drive around, and you look on these different lots, and they're packed in there like sardines, and you ruin the neighborhood. You can't move. They look like hell. They don't look good. And that was the reason why I put in. My intent is not to hurt the businessman or somebody trying to make a buck. That's not the intent of this petition. But I figured that if Council Green wants to come in front of the council to sell cars, then there should be a minimum of 10 cars, a minimum. So we don't have a car lot on every 50 feet up the road. You know, just because it's a small acre of less than 4,000 square feet. That's the only thing. Because, you know, now you're competing, now you're not getting, in my opinion, just only in my opinion, you're not getting good quality cars because you're competing against everybody else and you want to sell the cheapest car for your buck. And then you get what you have. That's the only reason why. Maybe I'm saying it the wrong way, but that's how I look at it. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Swowski, did you have anything else to add? It looked like you were chomping at the bit. Okay, all right. I have a motion to approve from Councilor Van Hazinga
Second.
and a second from Paul Boschman. Speaking on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
No.
No.
It will be 3 in opposition, so it does not pass. And that was Walsh, Van Hazinga. I'm making notes, Green. And then it was, Councilor Kuchar, you were a yes?
I was a no.
You were a, Councilor Van Hazinga, you were a yes.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, next before,
If I could just add, I'm going to put something in the zoning to address this in some way, shape, or form. So we'll be seeing that, and it might be another opportunity to deliberate this within the context of zoning, not a dealer's license. So stay tuned for that.
okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Next before us petition 21220, Councilors Di Natale and Schultz on behalf of Beatrice LeBlanc to install a no parking sign in front of 31 Spruce Street. And I know Sergeant Boudreau, you are dying to speak to this.
Yeah, we went up there and spoke to Miss LeBlanc and her daughter, and this basically turned out to be just a parking issue, and they just didn't know the avenue of how to fix this. They never had called the police to complain that somebody was encroaching on their driveway. So Officer Shabbat went up there for me and basically told them how many feet that people need to be away from their driveway, and we pretty much solved the problem. So I had reached back out to the 2 counselors, and I believe that they were fine with this to be a leave to withdraw situation. We have not heard back from Miss LeBlanc or her daughter, so I believe that the problem was solved up there.
Okay, so we would be amenable to, and I see from Councilor Boschman, he has given a motion leave to withdraw and a second from Councilor Van Hazinga. So speaking to the motion, all those in favor of giving it leave to withdraw?
Yes.
Aye.
Good. All right, so that has been given leave to withdraw. Next on the agenda is a discussion review of the parking study final report from Mr. Sawowski.
Tom, you're currently muted.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to present this evening. This is actually a petition that went through in June and was referred to the Economic Development Committee in their July meeting. And then it was also referred to the Public Safety Committee. And of course, you know, then there was the August recess, and there's only been one Public Safety Committee meeting before this one. And it was a pretty packed agenda. So, you know, it's been a little bit of time coming, but I wanted to take this opportunity to review the parking study with the Public Safety Committee and then talk about the city's phased approach to implementing the recommendations in this study. And, ultimately, I want to get the Public Safety Committee's input on this process and the approach we're looking to take, both in the short, medium, and long term. And then in the very immediate term, in the next few months, we'll actually be coming through with some appropriation requests for a grant from the 40R Smart Growth Program to look to address some of these changes. So I wanted to make sure before bringing that appropriation request in front of the council that both the Economic Development Committee and the Public Safety Committee had a chance to look at what we're thinking about with regard to parking changes, specifically in the downtown. So I'll go ahead and dig in now. The Walker Consultant Group, the parking study that you all had received, it was developed in 2019 in partnership with Fitchburg State University. It was really looking at parking with a 10-year time horizon, thinking about how we would gauge our parking needs with future projects like City Hall, the Theater Block, and the Fitchburg Arts Community, and others when they're completed. And it had three main goals. First and foremost, it wanted to analyze the supply and demand around City Hall and the Theater Block area. Basically looked at anywhere downtown within walking distance of those two properties. It also looked to develop cost feasibility estimates for the FSU city shared parking. As the council knows, instead of building out a parking facility ourselves for our City Hall redevelopment, we partnered with Fitchburg State University and the Theater Block. So this was really an effort because the university will be paying for that to look at what the different options might be and what the most cost feasible approaches would be. And then finally, once we're sort of under the hood, so to speak, looking at parking, they wanted to conduct a policy analysis of city parking enforcement and in particular downtown parking enforcement. So here's the study area. It roughly went out to the northwest to the Upper Common and the Fitchburg Arts and the Federal Building, and to the southeast to the Mill Street lot. So again, I know this committee in their last meeting was looking at the lot at Day in Maine. That wasn't within the scope of this study, although the policy recommendations covered all of downtown. The demand analysis just covered this portion. And so they looked at all of the public garages, all of the restricted public parking, for example, the Redevelopment Authority's 166 Boulder Drive, that is public parking, but it's restricted to tenants of the building and visitors of the building. They looked at, credit union parking, on-street parking, and then brought in all of the private parking. And in total in this area, we've got about 1,600 parking spaces. So after they did an audit of that existing parking, they did, and here it is in graph form, they did a occupancy analysis. And what they did essentially is went from 10 a.m. all the way to 9 p.m. at night at these various intervals. And they looked at the effective supply of parking. And the effective supply, as you can see there at the bottom, takes into account, even though the total space inventory is 1646, the effective supply is 1564, because they basically reduced that sum total by 5% to take into account that some spaces might be unavailable, because somebody double parked or road maintenance is taking place or whatever reason. So from that effective supply, then they look at within those 5 time slots, how many vehicles are parked. And then they come up with an occupancy ratio and show how many spaces are available. So this is the entire downtown in that study area at its peak. And this again is including private parking spots. We utilize 44% of our parking downtown. And as you'll see within the public facilities, that number is much lower. And of course, once we get down to 9 p.m., that drops to 12% utilization. So they show that we actually have ample parking supply for the most part within this study area. And then they actually graphed it out, and you should have received this in the study as well. They looked at every single parking lot and as well as on-street parking in the city, or in the study area, I should say, and they color-coded it Green are those areas where there's more than ample parking supply available. Yellow are those areas where there's still plenty of parking available, but it's nearing capacity. And red are those areas where our parking supply is currently at capacity. So, you know, the areas you see in red, Pritchard Street at 10 a.m., Wallace Ave at 10 a.m., and then Wallace Ave at both noon and 6:30 p.m. And that largely accounts for the senior center as well as the court facility. But really, for save those two examples, we really do have ample capacity at a variety of different lots throughout the study area. Of course, if we were looking at the Day Street lot that you all talked about in October, that would be red as well. But for the most part, we have ample parking downtown. And then here's occupancy by facility type. Our private parking lots and public restricted lots, again, that's like the FRA, that's like the university's theater parking as it exists currently. Those are both under 70% at peak and then go down dramatically. Whereas the actual public, both on-street and public facilities, never go above 35% capacity. And that's pretty consistent throughout. So that was really the results of their supply-demand analysis. They showed we have ample parking in the study area. The next thing they looked at, and I'm just going to gloss over this one because it's not really pertinent to our conversation today, but it was in the study, and they looked at within the theater blocks proposed parking area that, again, City Hall will be sharing in the future. They looked at a 68 space surface lot and then 114 space garage. And that would in essence be what you see at the Mill Street garage, where it's one underground lot and one above ground. And, you know, there's a pretty dramatic price difference between the two. And that can show you how pricey parking can be to build. It's about a $1.6 million difference. But even despite that difference, after the study, the university determined that the 114 space garage was necessary for both their needs and the city's needs, and ended up moving forward, even though it was the pricier option. And then finally, they, in the parking study, they looked at different policy. Oh, somebody have a question? They looked at different both policy and technologies we could incorporate to improve our existing parking enforcement. And one of the important things they looked at was license plate recognition technology. And I'm sure Sergeant Boudreau knows this well. I believe the police force already uses this on many of their vehicles. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's license plate recognition. So it's a camera that can recognize license plates. And, you know, for the police, of course, they then run scans and, you know, look for stolen vehicles and the like. But for parking enforcement, it serves a different purpose. So the camera can detect based off of a license plate if a parker has a permit to park in a public lot. They could, you know, you think about the old school way where a parking enforcement officer might chalk a tire to determine how long a vehicle's been in place. Now LPR technology can actually do that virtually. So when they drive past a vehicle, or you know, as the vehicle enters a parking facility, it can actually take a picture, and that timestamps how long it's been sitting in that parking spot. So there's both a mobile and a stationary license plate recognition technology, and they recommended us utilizing both of them. The stationary, as you can see, is something you would put at the top or the entryway of a parking facility. Another technology recommended, I'm not sure if this is moving forward, is so they looked at other types of, in place of a meter, what might we be able to do? And multi-space meters, pay and display, was one suggestion. That's something that we have currently at the Mill Street lot and at the Putnam garage. Another idea could be multi-space meters, pay by the plate. So you just enter your plate number. You don't have to bring a receipt back and put it in the dashboard. And ultimately, they looked at all these different technologies and they came up with a few key policy recommendations. The first was to upgrade the city's downtown parking systems to pay by plate, again, where you put the license plate in as opposed to the ticket you put in the dash, with LPR enforcement technology, stationary enforcement for the parking lots. So again, the mounted cameras, and mobile for on-street parking. They also recommended raising the on-street parking rates by a quarter and raising monthly passes to at least $50 a month. Currently, they are $40 and $30 for reserved and unreserved parking, respectively, in those various lots. And then they also considered contracting with a professional third-party parking operator. And they recommended the opening of City Hall and the theater block be used as a springboard for these changes. So these big picture policy recommendations, these long-term policy recommendations, while we might agree to some of them in principle, we felt that we needed to take a more phased approach because this is really some long-term recommendations they'll make. And now I want to talk about why we did that. And the first reason is cost. They estimated the capital cost to upgrade these systems to be approximately $400,000 in total. And you can see the rundown here. Considering the current fiscal environment, it doesn't seem prudent to make this type of investment today, but rather to gradually work up to it. And there's a few other reasons I'll talk about now as I review the phased approach. So working with the city treasurer, working with the mayor's office, we thought about ways we could create a more incremental approach as opposed to this big splashy 10-year goal. So we came up with this phased approach because the full changes are cost prohibitive in the short term. It's because the goals are long-term in nature, and we really need some short-term improvements in the next 6 months, and I'll talk about why in a few minutes. But then we also felt like rates should be adjusted to reflect demand, which is currently low. They recommended raising the parking rates, and as you all saw, we have ample supply right now, and we're actually not using enough of our parking. And I don't think we should be raising the price if it's something that is currently in very low demand. And finally, we felt rate changes should be tied to an availability goal. And I'll talk about that briefly. So an availability goal sets a target for effective utilization of a city's parking supply. And this is a common planning phrase to say about 85% occupancy is considered to be the sign of a healthy parking district. So there's strong enough demand that people are taking advantage of parking, but it avoids the negative consequences of just having to circle around and around to find a parking space. There's parking available, but it's mostly being utilized. And here's just some other examples of, Nelson Nygaard, which is really the forerunner in parking policy throughout the country. They're a consultant. They also mentioned the importance of that 85% occupancy per block goal. And Donald Shoup, who is kind of like his book, The High Cost of Free Parking, is like the Bible of parking policy. And he also recommended the city councils establish a target occupancy rate, such as 85%, and instruct a parking authority to set the right prices to achieve that rate. So, as he mentions up here, it's it's a public good, and we should be utilizing that public good and making sure people are taking advantage of the existing parking, especially in Main Street, where we've got a lot of struggling businesses that need support. So now I'm going to talk about the short, medium, and long-term goals of our phased plan. So in the short term, we'd like to implement mobile and or stationary LPR technology in the Mill Street garage as a pilot for utilization across the system. This would increase ease of parking, and it would be a benefit to Main Street businesses. It would enhance the ease and efficiency of enforcement in a really cost-effective way. It would allow for consumer parking on the covered and surface lot. And this one's super important because when we go to two-way Main Street and two-way Boulder Drive, we're going to be removing a significant amount of Boulder Drive parking. And if we just remove that parking without replacing it in any way, businesses like Strong Style Coffee or Tryst or the new restaurant that's moving into Beamer's, they're going to be struggling for parking. So by allowing for parking in that lower lot, which at its peak is at 20% capacity at its peak, we can then provide that additional parking to compensate. And then we would maintain the existing Mill Street system, 2-hour free parking, without the capital expense of updating the oft-vandalized kiosk. The current pay-by-plate or multi-space meter kiosk is often vandalized, and this would circumvent the need to continue to utilize that system. So the goal here would be to implement within 3 to 6 months to make the way for the Main Street Polar Drive conversion. And I do have monies available for appropriation that, after I run this through the Public Safety Committee, I'll be bringing in front of the council to ask for support. But I didn't want to bring that money and ask for that support without giving you guys the full understanding of where we're headed. This is not just a one-time fix, but it's really part of a larger, broader solution. And now I'll briefly touch on the improvements that would be needed in the short term. We would implement mobile and stationary LPR if the budget allows on Mill Street. We would continue 2-hour free parking. We would allow for half and all day parking passes to be registered online.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
So you register online, and then basically the LPR would know if it's a permitted parker or not. And then overnight parking similarly registered online, and those not in the categories above would be ticketed like they always are. And then again, it would allow for both the top and the lower entryway parking at that Mill Street lot. So those are the short-term improvements. In the medium term, we'd like to implement gradual technology enhancements to get LPR in other parts of the downtown, most importantly on street and the Putnam Garage. So this would increase the ease of parking by reducing the reliance on coin meters. Who here has coins these days? And actually nobody does. There's a coin shortage. Increasing the demand of on-street parking is a benefit to struggling Main Street businesses, providing a revenue neutral approach, and gradually increasing infrastructure investments, but meeting current demand levels. So we're not going to spend $400,000, but we're kind of working up to it. And again, enhances the ease and efficiency of enforcement. We'd like to do this in the next year to two, earlier if we could. And what the medium-term improvements would mean, we would remove the on-street meters and provide time-limited free parking. And again, demand on street is currently 35% at its peak. We would increase parking fines to make up for lost revenue. Basically, about $40,000 comes from coin meters. Between parking fines and increasing the parking permits, we could make up for that difference. Linking the police department LPRs to allow for a force multiplying LPR enforcement, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays when there's no parking enforcement existing. And this was a discussion that we had with Chief Martineau when we initially had this plan in spring, that the police department could potentially, if we get the right vendor, act as a force multiplier. At the Putnam Garage, we would do the same thing that we did at Mill Street, essentially in the medium term. Except for this last piece, increasing permit parking fees at Putnam and Pritchard to make up for that lost revenue. So again, that was a recommendation that I have heard from housing developers in particular who are looking for permit parking for large housing developments that don't have existing parking. It's well known that our permit parking fees are actually quite low, and we could increase them slightly to recoup any revenue we might lose by getting rid of those coin meters. And then finally, the long term is to really implement efficiently managed pay-by-plate kiosk. That's really the big money investment to meet growing parking needs as several development projects take hold in the downtown. We would look to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness, provide enhanced systems to control demand, because the idea being in the long term will be at high demand. And our goals would shift to encouraging utilization of parking that's not being used to encouraging turnover in a bustling downtown. And then in this long-term vision, we would establish benchmarks to work towards. So any decisions on increasing parking rates would be made because of really high demand, not arbitrarily because they look low. And the time frame here would be about 5 to 7 years, but largely determined by the fiscal health of the city and or parking demand. And so the goal here would be to implement multi-space meter technology when on-street demand hits 75%, would be to adjust LPR enforcement to account for this system. You need to make some tweaks to that system for that to work. And then within the parking structures, implement enhanced controls. You can actually have gates that utilize that photo. So the LPR. So if you are a permit parker, the gate would lift. If you are not, you would have to, take a ticket, I believe how it works. I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you. And then implementing hourly paid parking when structured parking hits 75% demand. So again, it charges increased fees to increase demand, not just arbitrarily. And again, that's long-term, that's 5 to 7 years, but I just wanted you to know where we're thinking about heading. And I'll stop there. But again, just happy to take any questions, comments, or feedback. And again, the goal will be to bring this smart growth zoning incentive payment in front of the council and to request the beginning of implementation for some of these short and medium term goals. And happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you, Tom. That was informative, and I see that our first question is from Councillor Boschman.
Did I hear you correct that the university wants to put in the 2.5, 2.1 million? Did I hear that right?
Yes, and I'm not sure I'd stick with the number at this point because they're starting construction in 2022. But they are going to go with the larger option. They do need more parking, they feel, for folks that would use the theater, but they also know that the city has a demand as well, both for employees and city councilors and others that would attend evening meetings.
Now, in your study, in the Walker study, they talk about shared parking and these different businesses. Now, when they say shared parking, is these businesses like, say, Fidelity or the Redevelopment Authority, will they be allowed to charge the person to park in their lots? Or no?
Yeah, so what they were looking at there, I think number one, they just wanted to get a sense of all the parking that was out there in the study area, but they were also considering both for the city in the short term until this structure is built, but also for the theater in the long term, if they ever needed overflow parking for a big event, what could be some other avenues they might be able to pursue to have overflow parking? And that might be a partnership with Rollstone Bank for free parking for an event. It could be paid parking. I think they were just really identifying what was all out there.
And then my other question is, numerous times throughout the study, Walker's study, they keep on emphasizing that we should be raising the rates because we haven't raised the rates since 2006, 13 years. And that they say that we're too cheap and we don't make enough money to maintain the buildings that we have. And now I just heard you talk and you don't really want to raise the rates. Now, I went to one of the planning board meetings on the Day Street building. They want to build 100 units and they want to put parking across the street. And now they're going to pay anywhere from 70, if I'm not mistaken, $70 to $85 per month for their parking spaces. How come we're so cheap?
For the permit parking at the one that you're referring to at the intermodal station that's run by Mark.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's that, but I could be wrong, but you're absolutely right. Our permit parking is actually pretty underpriced compared to other, permit parking overnight facilities in other cities. Generally, we're seeing upwards of $60 to $75, $80. I don't think we would need to even raise them that high in the short term. And again, that's maybe more of a medium-term goal, and that would be another policy change. But I think it would be feasible to make some incremental adjustments there.
And Tom, one more thing. According to here, again, according to your study, Walker's study, they keep on emphasizing we have more than adequate enough parking, and that they recommend that you get the LOS where you can walk 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and 5 to 7 minutes, depending where you want to park. And they also made some other recommendations. Why do we want to spend $2 million? I know the university spending, but the city is going to be kicking in something. I presume they will. And my next question will be, are the employees going to pay for some of this parking that they're going to ask for? I'm not asking to pay for the whole thing, but a portion of it, because they're the ones that are taking their cars up and using the garage.
So I think the existing arrangement that we have today, you know, employees do not pay for parking. It's a benefit to working for the city to have parking nearby. And I think it's a reasonable one to assume of an employer. And certainly as a city employee, I hope that trend continues. You know, I think that there are a number of mechanisms for the university to recoup their investment for evening events and the like. But I don't, as a municipal employee who feels like that is a benefit that we should keep, I don't, maybe I'm biased, I shouldn't speak on it, but I think that's something that we should continue to uphold. I think we should be able to have nearby parking. You know, frankly, if we don't do it at that structure, were we to have it at 166 Boulder Drive where the redevelopment authority is, we're taking away parking from a potential tenant for them in the future. So, you know, wherever we would end up parking, I'm not sure if there's a better fit than where we're going. And I think this is a way to also help support this mutually beneficial development from taking place.
All right, and then Tom, I'm just going to stop you there. I've got another comment from Councillor Walsh, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Sure.
Thank you. Do I have the floor?
You do,
Councilor Green,
yes.
thank you. Tom, I just wanted you to clarify that the amount that the university is spending, that's the parking structure, and that's separate from the costs that are outlined in this document here.
Right.
Okay.
So they had 3 different goals of the study, and one of them, I just wanted to, it was part of the study, so I wanted to at least discuss it in brief, but really the things I'll be bringing to the council in the future will be more related to just the policy change piece.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and just to be mindful of our next subcommittee meetings, we're going to wrap the discussion up. Tom, thank you for bringing this forward. And we will see you a little later. We've got your appointment before us, and then I see you've got communication with Ann Cervantes tonight also. So I guess we'll see you a little later.
Sounds good. See you soon.
All right. Thank you. That concludes tonight's public safety meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.